Phantasmagoria is defined as a sequence of real or imaginary images like those seen in a dream. It was also used in theater to project horrifying images of demons and ghosts onto screens and walls via the use of a special lantern. But the Phantasmagorias Concrete Revolutio includes are less in the nature of horror. In fact, they are quite the antithesis. One of the synonyms for the word phantasmagoria is fantasy, and I think that fits better with what Concrete Revolutio conveys. The characters undergo these illusions and these dreams of what they believe to be true, but as the series progresses, they come to realize that these fantasies are just that, fantasies, and that the reality of the situation is far different. The main protagonist of the series, Jiro, goes through these fantasies. As a child, he looks up to Rainbow Knight as this warrior of justice, and Rainbow Knight manages to inspire Jiro to grow up fighting on the side of good. This dream is ultimately far different from what ends up happening. Jiro ends up working for the Superhuman Bureau, a group with already questionable morals. While the Bureau presents itself as this group who is looking out for superhumans and trying to protect them, and while those are also Jiro's intentions within the group, the Superhuman Bureau also supports a government that has abused and experimented on superhumans. Sure, he appears to be doing good on the outside, however deep down, who the Bureau supports contradict their own mission. Even when Jiro leaves the Bureau, he still isn't quite in the position he dreamed of. Now he's viewed as a rogue and a criminal. One particular line during his fight with Shiba in episode 3 gives a lot of context to this. No matter who wins, we're no longer justice. In spite of what may be the outcome of the fight, Jiro is still not following what the people in power consider good. It's not saying that he isn't fighting for what he believes to be justice, but rather that his brand of justice doesn't coincide with general consensus. Thus, he isn't the hero he had always fantasized being. Moving on to Detective Shiba. He's very much a character who had disillusioned himself into thinking he lived in a world with objective right and wrong, and that this objective right and wrong was reflected in what the government's own laws were. He does this in spite of knowing that the government's own laws do not fall in line with his own viewpoints, because as a robot, he feels he needs to follow one objective truth. This eventually leads him to realizing that this belief was ultimately an illusion. When he is faced with someone who parallels his old beliefs, that right and wrong shouldn't really be pondered upon since rule of law is the ultimate deciding factor of justice. He realizes ultimately that no matter how much he tries to cover it up, what this government and Superhuman Bureau is doing doesn't follow his own moral code. No one, man or machine, can view an objective right or wrong. Rather, they must decide for themselves what is good and what is evil. He brutally executes the space android that shared his old beliefs as a way to kill his past self and start anew. Even if the start is as a wanted criminal as opposed to this hero that follows the objective truth that society puts in place, the one he fantasized existing. One particular moment that really struck me as interesting was in the finale, when he converses with Furoda, who is the friend of every child. Detective Shiba responds with, "I was supposed to be that way too." Now, while not every episode has come out yet, so I can't say whether or not my interpretation on this is true or not, I interpret this to mean that he was supposed to carry out the mindset of a clear-cut right and wrong, and by letting Furoda go, he isn't doing what society would call right. But at the same time, by letting Furoda go, he is following his own brand of morality. He was supposed to be the friend of every child by sharing the same childish mindset, but deep down inside he knows what he actually feels, and in this instance makes a choice based upon that rather than rule of law. This once again has him not quite living up to the expectations of his own fantasies. This transitions into the final and perhaps most straightforward character I'll be discussing, Furoda. At the beginning of the show, we see that while he is older in age, he has never grown out of that childish mindset he's had, in which there are clear-cut good guys and bad guys. He assists the Superhuman Bureau in episode 2 with the thought that what he's doing is something good, only to end up realizing later on that he had bombed the colony of the Tartarus Bugmen, and that whom he befriended earlier was actually the queen of those Bugmen named Camp. This is when he comes to realize that while to the Superhuman Bureau, this was ultimately beneficial, to camp, this was the death of our own people and a major loss. Furoda is the friend of all children, and in some regards, the Queen had given off a childlike appearance, thus to some extent what he did could be seen as wrong because he betrayed his friend, but it could also be seen as the right thing to do because the Bugmen had been harming innocent people by putting them within the Black Fog. One could go on forever about whether or not what Furoda did was morally just, but that's the point. Through this series of events, Furoda learns that his actions may have not been heroic, and that his simplistic beliefs on good and evil were nothing more than a delusion. That human action is far more complex than he was led to believe. As a whole, Concrete Revolutio takes more simplistic ideas on justice that the characters have, and the series makes them question their own beliefs, and also makes them have to come to their own conclusions. It uses the Phantasmagorias the characters initially have as a starting point for more complex ideas the characters will have later on within the show, and I more than welcome those ideas, and I can't wait to see how they will conclude this great story.